Hey, Browns fans, welcome into the Dog Check podcast, part of the Believe Network of podcasts, and also airing on Bally Sports Great Lakes. I'm Spencer German, excited to be back with you as we continue into the dog days of summer. Mini camps are done, training camp just around the corner, it feels like, and the season will be here before we know it. But this week, I am thrilled to be joined by the one and only Chris Easterling, who covers the Cleveland Browns for the Akron Beacon Journal. Chris, appreciate you giving me some time. I don't know what it is. Whenever I have you on other platforms that I work at, it's cold. This time around, we're doing this, and it's like the most extreme heat we've ever seen in Cleveland in decades. I don't
know. It's good to see you, Spencer. Good to see you.
We'll just leave it at that, Chris. Obviously, like I kind of outlined, everyone's getting excited about football being just around the corner, training camp a little over a month away from starting for the Browns and really for the entire NFL. I know earlier we just got the announcement of every team's report dates, so it's creeping up on us. But before we look ahead, I actually want to look back for a moment. And, they just wrapped up last week, mini camp, to sort of put a bow on the offseason program. Which encompassed obviously starting back in April all the way through to June. As you look back on the weeks of work that the players put in, even from all the way back in April, just what were some of the big takeaways that you had for this team throughout the spring and then culminating with mandatory minicamp last week?
The first thing that kind of came to mind was that this team, it's going to be, it's I don't want to say complete team because obviously I think there's a lot of questions about this receiving core and what they need to do, especially I'm sure we will get to number 2 eventually. But, you kind of look around and if they're healthy, most of the spots on this roster are already, we're going into training camp with not a lot of true competition for spots. And it's going to be difficult for, I did a roster projection into last week, and it's like, it's like, there are guys that I left on the cutting room floor that I'm like, oh, wow. This guy in the previous years would seem like an automatic, but, they're not on this one just because and it's a credit to what Andrew Berry has built. The front office has built. They're coming off a playoff. You're seeing the fruits of the front office's labor. That said, it's just there's this underlying feeling of everything should be great about the. You should feel great about where this roster is, except for the fact that you can just point out little things. And it starts with the quarterback. I think if the quarterback was healthy, and we had more than 12 games over the last 4 years, basically, maybe we have a different opinion about, where the 3 years for him, I guess. Maybe we're at a different spot, but there's just, for as firm and stable as this roster appears to be, it just seems like there's just this uncertainty around it also that just sort of hovers underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It definitely feels like one of those years where, it's the paper champion type thing, right? Like on paper, I think the Browns do have one of the best rosters in football, but it's about kind of getting it all to come together. And we know that starts with the guy under center, number 4, Deshaun Watson. He had what looked like a really strong day. I know that was like the one day of the offseason program I missed, unfortunately, but he had a really strong day to wrap up mini camp last week. And, sort of pairing that with the day he had early in the week where there was some miscommunication, some things that he didn't do as well, but still kind of getting through that process of rehabbing. Just how should fans at this point feel about Deshaun Watson? Because there's obviously the looming questions with the shoulder and he talks about how it's going to be okay. He's referenced examples of in baseball, especially this injury with pitchers, and they're able to come back and still be fine. So that I think that should give fans some encouraging feelings about it. But until we see him out there throwing, we don't really know. but I also think like there was a lot made out of, one or two videos that maybe you posted or I posted or somebody else posted in spring practices where it was like maybe one bad throw where I don't think that's the end all be all. So sitting here today or in mid-June, how should people feel about Deshaun Watson going into next year based on what we've seen and based on what we haven't seen?
I think the thing that just keeps coming up, and I think we've talked about this before, is I just think cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Maybe is the right way to sum it up, because I was pleased with for where he is in, what his throwing program and what May and June really are for NFL teams. I think I was satisfied with where he's at. I mean, especially like you say, that last day, seeing him uncork that 50-yard throw to Elijah Moore that actually may have been just a little bit long, but it was reasonably on target, and it actually was he had to roll out, reset his feet and everything. So there was a lot to it that really, even though it was incomplete, you had to come away pleased with. But I just think, it's just like, I need to see him. Just need to see him do it in games. Like, all of this is nice. All of this is great. Andrew Berry going on NFL Network last night and said he's ahead of schedule. What does that mean in the middle of June? You know what? Be ahead of schedule. Go out against the Dallas Cowboys, throw for 300 yards. Then I'll say you're ahead of schedule. Not to take. I'm sure he is. I'll walk this comment back a little bit before I get myself in trouble. But I just need to see him in games and see him consistently play games. That's what we just haven't seen. You saw flashes of a good quarterback last year. You did. And anybody who says otherwise, I think is letting things cloud their judgment, because there were flashes. No, not necessarily always against great teams, but we don't put that on. We don't do that to other quarterbacks. If Deshaun went out, threw for 275 against Tennessee and looked really good, and then the shoulder, and he goes out and he lights up Arizona, and then goes out, has a bad first half against Baltimore, and then the last time we saw him play quarterback, he was lighting up, relatively speaking, what I think really was the best defense in the NFL last year, which was Baltimore. And, then we don't see him again. Give me something consistent I can hold on. Give me 15, 16 starts. Give me something where I can truly make, and not just me, but the fans in general can say, okay, this is what they really have here in number 4. And until we get that, whatever you want to say about him, have at it, because there's just not enough sample size to disprove whatever opinion you want to have on him as a quarterback.
Along the lines of Deshaun, and you mentioned Andrew Berry's comments about him being ahead of schedule, whatever that means again in June, like you said. But just based on what we know, and Deshaun's used the word conservative a lot, and kind of taking this conservative approach to his rehab. He hasn't been willing to promise anything in terms of like when he can take that next step. But are you anticipating that by the time we get to training camp at the Greenbrier on July 24th, that he'll be able to start, throwing in 11 on 11s and doing some of these things that we haven't seen him do yet? Or do you think that might still take another week or so before he gets to that point?
Again, I think conservative is the perfect word. I think they're going to, because they can't technically, oversee what he does this next month. I think they're going to take a conservative, I think they're going to step back to step forward, if that makes sense, when they start training camp. I think they're going to basically, we're just going to go back, we're going to pick up where we were mini camp where you were 7-on-7, not 11-on-11, and then gradually build up to where I think I would hope that by the time they get to the end of their stay in West Virginia, we're seeing him in team drills. We're seeing him 11-on-11 throwing against defenders, throwing 11 defenders and that sort of thing. I think that would be a good checkpoint. Have we seen him throw live against a full defense? And if that's the case, if we're coming back from West Virginia, having seen that, I think then from then you can sort of set set up the rest of the preseasons, the rest of training camp in terms of as an observer, not necessarily as one of the coaches, or you can sort of set up checkpoints where you can revisit where you feel like he's at, relative to maybe, joint practices, that sort of thing.
Just want to remind all our viewers and listeners to like, follow, subscribe, and review the Dog Check podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Believe Network of podcasts. And this week, having a conversation with Chris Easterling of the Akron Beacon Journal. We have put off the elephant in the room, I think, long enough, Chris. But obviously, the story that made headlines last week when mandatory minicamp was wrapping up was just the fact that Amari Cooper obviously sat out and missed the entire 3-day session of practices. And we know it has to do with his contract going to the last year of his deal. He just saw a bunch of receivers get paid this offseason in the range of 25 to even 35 million if you're on the high end where Justin Jefferson got paid per year. Is this a situation you think the Browns are more inclined to resolve by the time training camp rolls around, or could this potentially linger into August and maybe even get close to the regular season?
Elephant in the room. Is that an Alabama pun there? Crimson Tide with the elephant?
I would never bring them up around you. Don't worry.
I think the thing that's upset Amari Cooper is Jerry Jeudy getting an extension. I mean, if I'm Amari Cooper, I thought Amari Cooper would show up to minicamp. I thought because there's been nothing about Amari Cooper, at least in the time he's been in Cleveland, to indicate he's anything but a consummate pro.
Yeah.
Nothing. I thought, and especially, I mean, he was in East Lake for David's softball event the Saturday before. So it was like, I wrote that the contract was going to be an off the field issue, but I didn't think it was going to get on the field because I thought Amari Cooper would show up. I thought we were going to get to talk to Amari at some point, and then Amari was going to say what he said, whatever he says. Then he doesn't show up first day of minicamp, and it's like, oh, maybe this is just Amari. I'm going to send a message. But again, because I'm Amari Cooper, consummate professional, I'll be back on Wednesday and Thursday. I sent my message. I'm not happy. I want a contract. I want a new deal. But I'll be back on the field. And the fact that he was like, no, I'll take all the fines.
Yeah.
Tells me he's legitimately ticked off. And I think he has a right to be legitimately ticked off. Because why? What was the hurry? Who were the Cleveland Browns negotiating against to lock up Jerry Jeudy for 3 years?
Yeah.
Or 4 years, whatever. What was the rush to sign a guy who to this point has shown nothing in the NFL that says we need to build our receiving core around this guy? Before you take care of a guy, look, if you don't want to take care of either of them, I get it. But to take care of Jerry Jeudy before you take care of Amari Cooper, who's done what he's done, eighth in the NFL over the last 2 years in receiving yards. I would at least have tried to take care of him. But, they didn't. And I think Amari's like, is miffed and rightfully so. Now the question is do they find some common ground before July 23rd, when Amari Cooper's got to be in Berea to report?
Yeah, the Jerry Jeudy part of that's so interesting because you're right. Like, he sees a guy who hasn't even played a snap for the team get paid, and I don't think it's even like I don't necessarily think it's like a Jerry Jeudy thing, because from what we understand, Jerry, is kind of looked up to Amari, and they both are Alabama guys, obviously. So there's some sort of kinship, I guess, there. I think it's more so just the fact that he saw somebody get paid who hadn't done anything for the team, and he's done what he's done the last 2 years, like you brought up. And it's like, well, what the hell? But it's funny because, like, I actually thought the Jerry Jeudy move was somewhat smart for the Browns, because it was like, okay, we're getting out in front of a potential deal next year. In that way, you know what I'm saying? Like, because the market's going to balloon.
I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, because I even thought when they traded for Jerry Jeudy, I think I wrote it even in a piece or two, that maybe Jerry Jeudy was the Amari Cooper replacement.
Mm.
But I said maybe the Amari Cooper replacement because,
and we got to see,
maybe he just goes out and he's just like Elijah Moore. There's nothing. He's just a guy. He becomes just a guy. He does nothing, in his 1 year in Cleveland, and they're left with, decisions to make. But, I mean, it was a week. It was basically a week. He was in Cleveland, and they were giving him a new deal. And look, Amari's new deal wouldn't kick in until he's 31. So, and any deal longer than a 1 year deal would take you to. Everybody can do the math. Add 1 to 31.
I can do that math. I'm not.
I can do that math.
I can do that math. Yeah.
But I wonder if Amari Cooper is sort of a test case for the quote unquote guardrails that Andrew Berry talks about, when you're looking at position group,
yeah,
because you hear reports that nothing more than a 1 year deal has been offered to Amari, beyond nothing more than 1 year, and he's produced at 28, his 28 and 29 year in the NFL, age 28, age 29 year in the NFL, he was 1,000-yard receiver. Now, he also had injuries both those years.
Right.
And you look at him down the stretch last year, and he didn't quite look the same in the Houston playoff game. I mean, I wasn't expecting to see the same guy I saw in Houston the first time they played that season, but at the same time, he just didn't seem like the same receiver. That heel seemed to be an issue, but is this one where they're grappling with what do we really do with this guy? And like you say, Amari's like, he's looking around at his peers and he's saying, well, look what they're getting. They're getting 27, 28, 29 million. And, but again, it goes back to he's going to be 31, 32. If I'm the Browns, do you front load it? Do you say you want more term? Well, then that annual value's just got to go down because we got to protect ourselves. Do you front load it so that year one is heavy and after that it's incentive laden? I don't know. I mean, this is the aspect of the business I'm not. I'll be honest. I'm not great at guessing what. Guessing. I mean, how you'd manipulate a contract. The perfect way to manipulate a contract for a guy in Amari Cooper's position, but you have to get Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
You have to get Amari Cooper in this year. What happens after this year? You got to figure that's down the road. You have to get Amari Cooper in because otherwise, it does. I mean, otherwise, this offense. Just forget about the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because that receiving core. I mean, we're banking on Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman to have all career years, because that's what you're going to need to make up for an absence of Amari Cooper. Now, let's get to that point before we truly hit that button. But I don't believe this is just going to go quietly. I think that we are just starting with this discussion. We're not nearing an endpoint.
Yeah, that's important for fans to know. And to be clear, like when I mentioned, I thinking the Jerry Jeudy decision was smart in that they were getting kind of out in front of things, which I understood. This is kind of the ramifications of that, right? Like, okay, you were trying to be, proactive on one hand, but by not being proactive with your top receiver, now you got to deal with this. So you're seeing this play out in real time. It sounds like there's a chance it's probably going to likely, unless they get something done here the next month, linger into training camp. We'll have to see. I guess along those lines, one final thought on this. Does the fact that some other wide receivers who are into their 30s getting paid recently, I'm talking like Devontae Adams, who obviously when he got paid was maybe probably the top receiver in football. I know Calvin Ridley just got paid this offseason as he turns 30, which I was actually shocked that Calvin Ridley's already 30. That kind of caught me off guard for a minute. But and then Mike Evans just turned 30 this offseason and got paid. Does that help Amari's case at all that that they got paid into their 30s and he's looking for the same sort of thing?
Yeah, that does help Amari Cooper, because let's go one by one. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, who you want?
I would take Amari at this point, obviously, given what he's done. And Calvin, I think he's still kind of coming back from the year he missed off the suspension. He had a good year last year, but it wasn't Amari Cooper, no.
Mike Williams, Amari Cooper.
Mike Williams has been really, really steady. I would still take Amari Cooper for this team, because I think he fits like this group so perfectly. But I think that one's close because Mike Evans has been really good. Mike Evans has also been very injury prone, maybe even more so than Amari Cooper. So I think I'd lean Amari.
Well, but to that point, I mean, so you said Mike Evans, not Mike Williams.
Sorry.
I thought you said who also I think got paid this. But that injury stuff is a big check in. Marty's not just consistent; he consistently answers the bell. I mean, he's talked multiple times about playing through that core muscle injury. So the last one, Devontae Adams or Amari Cooper. This one could go.
Yeah,
whichever way you say.
I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with Devontae. I think he's still a really good receiver. I think being out in Vegas, he hasn't been able to do obviously what he was doing with Aaron Rodgers when he was in Green Bay.
Right.
But I think he's still a really good player. I would probably take him over. That would be the one I would maybe take.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a conversation though. I think still.
But I guess all three of those guys, you like you said, they're in the neighborhood. They're all in that same neighborhood. They're all around that same age, which is why why Amari's got the right to say, what do we, look at these guys, and look, you can talk about hometown discounts and this, that, and the other. But I mean, this is this is Amari's third franchise. It's not like he's playing for the Dolphins. That would be a true hometown discount. He's playing for Cleveland, and I guess I'm sort of rambling here, but but at the same time, the age concerns me. It's like this push and pull, this yin and yang of the production has never really gone down for Amari. In fact, it's been as good as it ever has been.
Yeah, first Browns receiver to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. I mean, it speaks for
since
itself.
He's come to Cleveland.
Yeah,
where he's been able to reemerge as a number one after sort of being hidden a little bit as a number two in Dallas. But then you have that age, so we'll see. I expect him to be at training camp, but I don't think, even if he reports to training camp, I don't think we've anywhere near the end of this.
I'll get you out of here with this, Chris. One of the more intriguing position battles that is going to play out at training camp as these guys kind of get back out on the field will be at the tackle spots. DeJuan Jones, I know he was actually out there getting some work in towards the tail end of mandatory minicamp. But Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin still working their way back from their respective knee injuries. They were standing outside with their position group, but they weren't really doing much. But as these guys kind of get back into the fold here, how do you see those spots shaking out? Jedrick Wills has been inconsistent over the years. Still some questions about whether or not they should extend him long-term. Obviously, DeJuan Jones really burst on the scene filling in for Jack Conklin last year, but Jack Conklin, when he's healthy, is a steady presence on that offensive line as well. Who gets what job? Who ends up where? Could we see DeJuan Jones try his hand at left tackle? How do you think that all kind of shakes out at training camp?
Tell me what happens with Jack Conklin. Because I think if Jed's healthy, Jed's the left tackle. And then it all comes down to what do they do with Jack Conklin? Because do they look at Jack and, I mean, I guess in theory they could eat a bunch of money if they really wanted to, or could they trade him? I don't know. But if Jack Conklin's healthy, I think, and again, this is just mid-June speculation with nothing really. I think if Jack Conklin is healthy, Jack Conklin starts at right tackle. If for no other reason, then it gives the Browns an opportunity to maybe showcase him a little bit, knowing that they have DeJuan there as well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like throwing a lure out there in the water. Hey, maybe we can attract a fish here that we can get out of this extension that we rushed into with Jack 2 years ago. That probably was a little too rich, given hindsight. Not even maybe in hindsight, I think even at the moment, some people were a little surprised by the money and everything they turned. Yeah. But I think it all comes down to Jack Conklin, because he sort of holds, because it's pretty clean if Jack can't go, because then you put DeJuan at right tackle, you put Jed at left, and there you go.
He's Chris Easterling. You can read his work at the Akron Beacon Journal. You can follow him on X at CEasterlingABJ. Chris, I'm always grateful for you giving us some time and getting a chance to connect and talk and catch up this way. So I'll let you go cool off a little bit, but I can't thank you enough for giving us some time, my man. Thank you.
Hey, appreciate it. Always happy to be on with you.
This again, just want to remind you guys to like, follow, subscribe to the Dog Check podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we're part of the Believe network of podcasts. And we also air weekly on Bally Sports Great Lakes. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll be back with you next week with a new episode of the Dog Check.